So now I am so pleased to begin our day's conversations with Senator Rounds and our moderator, Andrew Ullman. I'm going to do the introduction as they're coming up. Senator Mike Rounds has co-led the bipartisan AI working group, and we are so pleased to have you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew Ullman is the managing partner of the Washington, D.C. office and co-lead of the financial services practice at Mayer Brown. Previously, he was Deputy Assistant to the President for Economic Policy and Deputy Director of the White House National Economic Council. Prior to his time at the White House, he served as the Republican Chief Counsel and Deputy Staff Director for the U.S. Senate Banking Committee. Thank you both for being here today.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Well, Senator, thank you for being here. I figured before we jump into AI, we have to get the kind of big elephant out of the room.
No pun intended.
Which is no pun intended, which is we had this election. It went pretty well for Republicans. They've got the trifecta of the House, Senate, and White House for the first time in 8 years. What's your takeaway from the election?
It's the economy, number one. It was a recognition by a lot of people out there who live day to day and just simply don't want the price of bread up high. They didn't want the price of eggs to be as high as it was. They were concerned about the price of gas being up by over 37% over a 4-year period of time. They really felt that in their pocketbook, and their wages weren't rising as fast as the costs were rising. I think that was a significant part of this. The other piece on this is if they went to buy a home, they saw that mortgage interest rates were higher than what it was before. They felt as if things were getting away from them. And in the overall picture of things, they just didn't feel like things were moving the direction that they wanted it to happen. And you know, I think a lot of people follow foreign affairs as well, and they were really concerned about what they saw as a world that was on fire. They looked at what happened in Afghanistan, and that stayed with a lot of people. They maybe wanted us out of Afghanistan, but they didn't like the way that it happened. They still see that airplane leaving with people trying to get on it. And naturally, you have Ukraine and Russia, and they don't see things going there as they would like to see them go. And then you have, right in the middle of everything, Israel and what happened with Hamas and Hezbollah. And it just seemed like no matter where they turned, there was nothing that was working right. And I think the culmination of all of that added up to the point where there was going to be a change made. And the offer that came was, remember what it looked like before. Remember what interest rates were before. Remember that you could get a house before. And so the pressure was, what we're doing now is not working. And at the same time, what was there before, we liked that price compared to what it was today. We want to go back.
So it's the economy. So
exactly.
So speaking of the economy, AI has a potential to have a huge impact on the economy. We're already seeing it. Stock prices, the market clearly sees the potential there. You have made AI policy a real priority in your legislative agenda. Before we get into the kind of specifics of policy, I'd like just to know, why have you focused on AI and given it so much of your attention?
I serve on the Armed Services Committee, and I serve on the Intel Committee as well in the Senate. But on the Armed Services Committee back in about 2016, 2017, John McCain was the chairman. And at that time, he was lobbying that we should have a cybersecurity committee as well. Most of us didn't think we should have a separate committee, but we thought that we should have a subcommittee in the Armed Services Committee. I decided I wanted to be one of the people that would learn, because I don't know anything about cybersecurity, but I thought it was a pretty serious issue. So I told him that I thought I would like to be on the committee, and he says, well, I'm glad to hear that because I'm planning on having you chair it. And I've been either the chairman or the ranking member since we created the committee. But when you look at what cyber does and the threats that cyber have in the world today, it's not going away. And we can't hire enough cyber experts to be able to stay ahead of our adversaries who understand that if we're going to be fighting in 5 different domains, air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace, that the most inexpensive way in which to impact all of the other domain fighting is with cyber. You can shut down systems, you can shut down water systems, you can shut down telecommunications. You can do lots of things to people, and it's not as expensive as creating new weapon systems. And what we found was that no matter where we went, cyber was getting faster and faster, decisions were being made faster and faster. We started seeing the fact that computers were doing a lot of the research and a lot of the work, and it became evident that as artificial intelligence, or as most people used to call it, machine learning, as that was coming into play, it was being implemented, but there wasn't any big deal about it. It was simply making computers faster and faster. Things started to change when the discussion happened that these computers could actually train themselves, and that they could, as the power of each of these systems became more and more, that the application of that tool of artificial intelligence, not just with being able to identify ways to get into your adversary's systems, but you had to have it because the adversaries were using it to get into your systems, and you had to be faster than them to protect it. And so it became a matter of a race, and artificial intelligence accelerated that race to who could protect systems. I'll share with you today, and maybe you want to talk about this a little bit more in the future, but if you're on a cell phone today in the United States, your information is not private. I can tell you right now that the Chinese Communist government has access to any voice or text communication you do on any one of the major cell phone providers in this country. And, and they've been able to get into the systems, and they can access it. The question is, are you one of the people they want to listen to? Are you one of the people that they want to see what your texts look like? Well, that's being powered in a lot of ways using artificial intelligence. We're going to have to use AI to move them out of those systems in the future, but we're also going to have to use AI to keep them out long term. So, yeah, the reason why I got into it was because of defense purposes. But what I saw was that we're using it right now in other areas that sometimes people don't realize. Financial services has been using it for years to make good decisions, to be able to understand where the market's going and so forth. But medical science, the biological research that we're doing and so forth, has been accelerated at an unbelievable rate. And for me, the quality of life that we can improve in America, if we accept artificial intelligence as a part of the biomedical research community, and we are, but using huge databases, we're going to change the quality of life for millions of Americans in a very, very few short years. It's happening now. The costs to get it in and get it set up compared to the costs in terms of the benefit back in is small. But we have to convince the American people that it's the right thing to do. So why am I into it? I see AI in every aspect of our lives.
Well, so you made a great case for the importance of AI policy. So the question is kind of going forward. I know you've also been one of the members of the bipartisan Senate AI working group, which got a lot of attention over this last Congress. They put out a report entitled A Roadmap for AI Policy in the U.S. that was much discussed, widely read in Washington, got great reviews. Can you give us an update of what you think kind of the next steps for the working group are, and how you kind of feel the working group's product, the results of the report? Are you happy with where it is and where it's going to go?
Let me just start by this. This was created in a bipartisan fashion. If you want to get things done in the United States Senate long term, not just year to year, but long term, you have to do it in a bipartisan way. You have to bring in members on both sides of the aisle. Chuck Schumer, the leader on the Democrat side, was part of the team. Martin Heinrich, who is my AI caucus co-leader in the Senate, and Todd Young. The four of us together worked this through, and we did everything we could to keep it on a bipartisan basis. And a couple of things that we did that we agreed after good discussion was we weren't going to try to do a mega bill. We weren't going to try to do an omnibus on AI because that would have alienated other members of the Senate. The second piece is this is never going to go away in our lifetime in terms of the developments. So we need the committees to buy in, and we needed the separate committees to recognize how much AI is going to impact the work that they do in all aspects of governance. Whether you're talking transportation, the Judiciary Committee, Commerce is going to have a huge role to play in it, defense, and so forth. So each of these committees, we wanted them to feel empowered to come back in. So we laid out a roadmap in which we talked about the things that should get done. But we didn't introduce the legislation. We wanted it to be introduced by individual members on a bipartisan basis in the separate committees, going through what we call regular order, which means everybody had a chance to participate and to become part of the team. That takes a little bit longer, but I think long-term it will be more successful. And the rest of the team, to their credit, all the way around, and think about it, if you're the Democrat leader in the Senate, you want to lead and you want to do these, and yet he worked with the team, and we got it done in a bipartisan fashion. And so far, it's working. Each of the different committees is incorporating AI-focused legislation in other bills that are coming through. The National Defense Authorization Act this year will have multiple areas where we're going to address areas in which we identify specifically the needs for AI or regulating or promoting AI use. You're going to see it in the appropriations bills as the different committees come through with their parts of it as well. So the ag bill coming around will have AI components to it.
Yeah, and I think any of us who've worked in the Senate know the importance of laying that groundwork and building common cause with across the aisle on issues, particularly ones like AI, where they're so bipartisan, is the way to move legislation ultimately forward. Which, speaking of legislation, you have introduced legislation to allow financial regulators to create regulatory sandboxes to help facilitate innovation. Can you tell us a little bit about the bill?
We've introduced the bill, and the idea is that financial services have been using AI for a number of years, but we didn't want it to go unregulated, but we wanted the regulatory organizations to say, okay, look, we recognize that the different businesses and organizations, in order to be competitive with people from around the world, they're going to have to innovate the types of products and services and the type of research that they do. And they're going to use artificial intelligence to do that. So let's lay out the parameters for, and with notification and with oversight, let's lay this out so that there's a series, agency by agency, into what they will allow the different organizations to do, how to do it, how to notify it, with protections so that people don't get hurt if there's mistakes being made. So we call it the sandbox, but the idea is to allow the different organizations, different groups to be able to go in and using artificial intelligence to gather data, using artificial intelligence to make decisions and so forth more rapidly than what they could otherwise, but to do it in a fashion that the regulators had eyes on it and that they weren't going to get in trouble, that the folks trying to innovate weren't going to get in trouble as long as they had gone to the regulators and said, look, this is what we want to do. Let's sandbox this. Let's put this into a parameter so that you know what we're trying to get done. You can monitor it with us, but it's in a safe zone, so to speak. And we think in doing that, we will find innovation move forward because, look, no business wants to get caught on the carpet and be fined for overstepping what they could regulatorily do legally. But if you have a place where you can go and you can test these things out, and the oversight coming from the agencies is one that says, okay, look, we want to learn from this too, so it's a joint venture, so to speak, everybody wins. And long-term, consumers win. And that's really what this is all about, is if you're a business and you need tools and you expect your financial service organizations that you're a team with to be able to present you with more data in a more timely fashion, you want them to offer those products and services to you. But if they're restricted because of the regulatory oversight that says, no, we don't know how to do that, then we'll never get ahead. And other people in other countries will beat us to the punch. So in order to be competitive, we want to have a place where you can go, you can test it, and know that you're not going to get your butt kicked by a regulator.
So I want to follow up on your points about the competitiveness of the U.S. on AI. Now, clearly, a lot of the innovation is occurring in the United States, but one thing that was very clear in the working group's report is that the members seem to be very concerned about overregulation potentially causing the United States to lose its edge. Like, how much of a core concern is that, and where do you see us right now internationally in terms of our competitiveness going forward?
We did 9 separate educational seminars where we had literally the top minds in AI development in the world come in. Investors, the techies, the entrepreneurs, that they came in and we came in behind closed doors. We didn't have the press in, but we let them do a free flow with us. And we'd have 18 to 20 of these folks at each one of these meetings. And it was amazing to listen to the top people in AI talk to one another with just members of the Senate and their staffs listening in. And the discussions, the big organizations that are well ahead in terms of AI development, smaller entrepreneurial types that that can move very, very rapidly, to the big guys and the little guys involved in it. And then we also brought in the organizations that were concerned, consumer groups and labor unions. We brought them as well to hear their points of view, but to listen to the discussion back and forth in kind of a safe zone. And what we found was there were areas of very broad agreement. Number one, there is room for a regulatory environment to exist. But number two, it should be, first of all, kind of like laying out the guidelines for the fair playing field. And then the other piece of this was that what we found was everybody said there is nobody going to get a ribbon for second place in this development between us and the adversarial parts of our world, specifically China. If we don't win this battle and have the best AI development plans long term, then they will have, and they will set the standards based on their values, not on our values, and we will end up playing second fiddle. And in doing so, we lose, and our economy loses. But more importantly, our way of life, the traditions that we hold dear in our country, we play second fiddle then. And I'm going to give you one example of that. China has really, really good capabilities using artificial intelligence, but their focus using it is different than what our focus has been. Today, if you're in China, they know where you're at when you come out of an apartment. They know which street you go down. They know whether or not you cross a red light or not. They know who you're talking to on the cell phones. They know whether or not you're being critical of the current administration. And in fact, if you want to get tickets to a play tonight, you're probably not going to get those tickets if they think that you are not a friend to the existing government in place. These are the types of things that artificial intelligence allows them to do. And by the way, they don't have to see your face to know who you are. They've developed other ways in which to identify people without seeing their face. These types of things right now are developing there. So their value has been on a police state. That's not our values. That's not the direction that we've tried to go. We want to do things in our country, number one, to protect ourselves on a very, very dangerous world with the best capabilities in our offensive and defensive weapon systems. But second of all, we want to improve the quality of life. We want to talk about medical breakthroughs. We want our biological research to be done in order to cure diseases, not to create pandemics. And yet I will tell you, around the rest of the world, there is research going on right now about how to create a pandemic. We've got to be in a position to fight that and to be one step ahead to find the vaccines and the therapeutics so that when those are released, that we can stop them as quickly as possible. There's a difference in values. And this is the opportunity for us to get ahead and to stay ahead. We're not that far ahead right now.
So one of the other key issues when we talk about financial regulation is preemption, right? Historically, there's been preemption has been a cornerstone of financial policy because the United States has sought to have a unified national market as opposed to 50 plus different jurisdictions kind of all regulating themselves. We have seen though in other areas recently, cyber, for example, privacy, where the federal government hasn't acted and states, particularly California, comes in and effectively sets the national standard. California recently had a major bill on AI that came close to being passed that would have effectively kind of regulated the industry. What's your view, particularly kind of coming from South Dakota, to make sure that, what's your approach to make sure that South Dakotans and kind of the rest of the country get a chance to determine how AI policy is regulated? Like, where's the role here for the federal government? And then also, there's also clearly a role for the states. Where's the role for the states in AI regulation?
This can be tricky. Number one, interstate commerce is critical. The founding fathers recognized that to begin with. Matter of fact, they gave us really a couple of missions. Number one was the defense of our country. But one of the other areas was to, in terms of providing for the common defense, but they wanted to promote interstate commerce. Today, you have to have broad regulatory capabilities that are nationwide. We recognize the frustration that some states have with particular areas, but when it comes to something which is of a broader nature that would impact interstate commerce, then there has to be preemption by the federal government. And we want to be careful how we do that, but it clearly has to be a case of where federal law needs to be superseding those particular attempts. It does not mean that the states don't play a role. And by that I mean, they were always designed to be the laboratory, and the founding fathers wanted it that way. And as you see frustrations expressed by the states in particular areas, particularly privacy, they want to protect their kids, and they see the applications that are out there, and they wonder whether or not there isn't a better way to protect kids who are being harmed sometimes by apps that really get in and impact them psychologically. And you'll see the states look at a whole lot of different areas. We can learn from that. And the different approaches that different states take will eventually create a consensus of where we should have a national policy developed. That's healthy. And that will allow Congress to move. Founding Fathers never wanted the federal government to be all-powerful. They were really afraid of an all-powerful government in Washington, D.C., or at that time in Philadelphia. They wanted the states to maintain their powers. So we've got to be careful when we start talking about preemption, but when it comes to interstate commerce, the Founding Fathers clearly recognized the need to not allow the states to build up those barriers state to state.
So kind of the flip side of that question then is, how does the United States engage internationally to set the international standards? There's a lot of ongoing international discussions about what the rules of the road are going to be for AI. Can you talk about how the working group and your views on how the United States can best ensure that it's a leader in AI?
Yeah, look, the one thing we found in talking to the folks that actually invest in this, and they talked about what they're doing in Europe. They talked about what the EU proposals were. And honestly, I mean, look, EU was thinking ahead in terms of laying out a regulatory format. But what the EU did actually brought some of those companies to the United States because they thought that they were overreaching in their regulatory approach to things. So it's not that these entrepreneurs and these larger organizations that want to develop AI wouldn't accept a regulation, but they want it to be helpful to them, and they want to know what the rules of the road are, and they don't want to have a burdensome reporting system to where you've got to go to the government and get permission before you can make a move. And in doing so, we've actually had people in my office who are moving their facilities, their AI capabilities out of Europe and into the United States. And they're doing it because they don't like the regulatory proposals that the EU had originally come up with. We can learn what parts of what the EU had suggested might be good, but we also can learn where it was limiting. And I'll give you just a couple of items that we think are important to do. We think that it's important for the folks that create compute power, the folks that are building the most powerful systems in the world, as they get up to certain levels that could be, if they were released or sold away from the United States, could really give an adversary a leg up. Then we want to be able to restrict, if you're going to develop it in the United States, we want you to have the market to be in the United States. With regard, and there's a difference between the compute power that you might use for, say, biological research, healthcare research, versus one for other, basically the ChatGPT approach to things. And when you're talking about compute power, you're talking about where they laid out, and where like in the executive order that the president laid out, you're talking about some of the most powerful systems that had not quite reached that level yet when he laid this out. But you're going to have to constantly modify that as compute power goes up at an accelerated rate. What you might have thought might have been around as a limiting factor, like for biological research, 10 to the 23rd flops, just as an example, you may end up with that being reached a whole lot faster than what you thought, or 10 to the 26th power for other types of activity. You may reach that a lot faster, so you don't want to put into law a limitation that says, you can't create that without coming in and getting permission or something like that. You want the innovators to innovate. You want them to feel like they're going to be able to do it here in the United States. Let me give you an example, though, because I'm giving you examples of things that we don't want to do. Here's what's one thing that we want to do. If something was illegal before, simply incorporating a faster decision-making process, and it does not change the fact that it would be illegal afterwards. That's the premise to begin with. So if something was wrong before, starting AI into the middle of it doesn't change the fact it's still wrong. On the other hand, if it was okay before, and you innovate and you bring in AI, doesn't make it wrong. It means it's still going to be okay unless there is a privacy issue someplace that has to be separately addressed. The guidelines, we think the guidelines should be laid out so that investors that come in here and as they innovate, one of the things that has put the Western world ahead of everybody else has been the ability to get paid for the ideas that you come up with and innovate with. Patents, copyrights. How do you work that in the area of artificial intelligence? And how do you keep track of it? And if you create a great new idea on how to innovate in that area, don't you want to protect that? Well, you know, very interesting. If you take a look at what's happened in China, they have not respected patents and copyrights. If you do it here, we do our best to respect that. So that's an incentive, that incentivizes people to do their research here. Those are the types of things that we want to do with our regulatory approach that I think incentivize development within the United States.
Well, just follow up on that
Yeah.
is, you know, you've spoken about some of the risks that we see, particularly, you know, fraudsters, foreign agents. Do regulators right now have all the authorities in law enforcement that they need to deal with the potential risks here at this point, or is this an area where you can see Congress legislating?
We believe, most of the regulators tell us they believe they have the tools, but we continue to ask them, do you have the tools to do this right? But in some cases, what they need also is they need the technical capabilities to be able to understand it and to write their actual regulations appropriately. There is not enough expertise in the federal government so that every single agency can have their own expertise. But what you can do is you can nest expertise in NIST. And that's the direction that we've decided to go, so that the business world, the technology world, can put on loan individuals with some of the finest expertise in the world, but put them into a place where they're already recognized and follow the way we do this with other things. I mean, if you go into a manufacturing operation, everybody knows what the manufacturing codes are for particular types of products, materials, and so forth. The same type of approach can be used when we start talking about compute power. So we think that's a better use of the dollars that we do have if we can share that area, those areas of expertise, and actually set up a side. We've got legislation to do it right now, to actually allow these folks to set up within NIST. And we think that's, right now, we think that's the correct direction to go.
Well, I tell you, Senator, I think I have to give you a lot of credit and your colleagues for doing this work. You know, from my experience in the Senate, you know, it requires, these are complicated areas. I can only imagine how you may have walked out of some of these meetings and said, what did I just hear? You know, I think all of us, as we learn about AI, the technological element is...
When your level is at about a third grade level like mine is, and you're talking about folks that, you know, are in their PhD levels, that's when it gets scary, and that's when you need good teams around you.
Sure. And
you need them to feel like there's a comfort level that we're really trying to get to the same place.
But I can also hear, though, in the way you're approaching this, as clearly a skilled legislator, that you're thinking about how to have the flexibility in legislation, yet at the same time the certainty, and that takes, you know, this process of which you've clearly undertaken a lot of time to master the subject matter. And I think it makes a lot of us really confident that the U.S. Congress is moving in the right direction.
I think we are. I mean, I'm optimistic. I think Congress, the Senate in particular, has gone way out of their way to try to keep this as bipartisan as possible. We've got real challenges coming up with regard to a budget, but we're going, I hope we invest dollars now that will pay huge benefits for the American public over the next 5 to 10 years, just in healthcare alone. But I'm very optimistic about that, and I'll just share with you, there is no way that we can lose on national defense. There is simply no excuse for us not focusing on the implementation of artificial intelligence into the defense of our country, because if we don't, we will not be in a position to defend this country very long.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to end this conversation. Again, I want to thank you for your leadership in this area, and thank you for being with us here today to share your views.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
That's great.